today with Pat Proctor. As you remember, the last time we were all together, Pat was running for office, and he is now one of the latest state representatives. Now, thank you, Pat. We appreciate everything you've done for both your country with your military service and now continuing to serve us in the state legislature. Now, when will you actually be sworn in?
So tomorrow afternoon, I am going to be sworn in, and I'd invite everybody, including you, but I only get one guest because of COVID precautions. So my lovely wife will be joining me in Topeka, and I'm just honored to have been chosen by the people of Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth to serve, and I feel that weight, greatly, and I'm eager to get to work doing things for our city.
Now, I live a little bit south of you in Wyandotte, but I know that from the time I've spent with you and for both speaking with your constituents that live here in Leavenworth and other friends, everybody is really excited to have you on board, including a lot of the other legislatures. Some of the legislatures I have spoke with at different events, and both social and political, have been very excited to have you on board and the energy you're going to bring to the legislative session. Now, I know you've been talking to a lot of people and you've been already immersing yourself in the job. What are the big things that the legislature has in mind for the upcoming session?
Yeah, well, not surprising, the number one concern in the legislature right now is COVID and the economic impacts of COVID. And so, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is really woefully behind right now on vaccinations.
Yes.
The CDC said last week that we were last in the nation, Kansas was, in administering our on-hand vaccinations. They caught up a little bit, but they got a long way to go. And then in the kind of economic realm, unemployment checks are just, there's this huge backlog. Even though the legislature provided a lot more money this summer for the Department of Labor, there are thousands of people still waiting for unemployment checks because they're stuck behind a backlog of tens of thousands of fraudulent claims. And so both departments are really... Yeah.
We've both received notices of fraudulent claims on our accounts.
So this is crazy. My wife got a notice the other day for the restaurant that she had fired herself from our restaurant and that she was claiming unemployment. So it's insane. And so both those departments are really in dire need of oversight. But another, to me, the biggest concern about the COVID is, the coronavirus economic shutdown puts so many people out of work. And, as of the fall, Kansas was near the bottom in the country in employment recovery. And so we got to get folks back to work. And the way we do that is we make it easier to own a business. Right now, the property tax valuations for this year just came out, and Leavenworth is the highest increase in the state of Kansas, Leavenworth County, for property tax valuation, 6.8%. And the other counties aren't far behind.
Yeah.
And that's a backdoor tax hike to get around the tax lid. And so we need to bring some more accountability to the property tax system and get those property taxes under control so folks can afford to hire people. And obviously a big concern for me, something that I promised my constituents I was going to do, is the value in them both amendment.
Yes.
It's going to be back up. The Supreme Court stripped Kansans of their right through their legislators to put common sense regulations on the abortion industry. And I would like to see it go to a vote of the people whether we should get those rights back. And so when that amendment comes up, I plan to fulfill my promise to the people of Leavenworth and support that.
We'll let Watch Kansas know what you need. We're more than happy to help get your word out.
I will.
Without a doubt. Now, we're talking mainly about the broader aspects.
Uh-huh.
What do you personally have planned for this upcoming session?
Yeah, well,
Besides the value of them both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have already filed and sponsored a bill to bring a veterans home to Northeast Kansas. Politicians been talking about it for 4 years.
Yes.
I'd like to actually see it get done. And all of my colleagues in the Leavenworth County House delegation have all signed on as co-sponsors of that bill, as well as a couple other representatives in the House. And so I'm hoping we can bring that home.
Love to see that.
Yeah, I know. And then the other big thing is doing something to improve the retirement benefits for our corrections officers.
Mhm.
I think we all saw during the coronavirus shutdown, when all those corrections officers were, locked in there with all those inmates, and we had one of the biggest cells of coronavirus right here in Leavenworth County at Lansing Correctional Facility. That really just highlighted the things that those officers do day in and day out, every day of the year. Coronavirus, no coronavirus. They deserve to be compensated for what they do, and they deserve retirement benefits that reflect the fact that the job that they do is so hard on their bodies and so hard on their souls. So I'm working on legislation right now that would give them access to the capers for police and fire. So that they, because their job's every bit as hard as policemen and firemen, so they should get the same retirement benefits.
Now, I know that the large amount of COVID cases in the correctional facility, I'm sure probably impacted some of your businesses, because I know that we go ahead and we frequently head to Leavenworth County for what the things that we like to do. And during that time frame, honestly, we didn't come to Leavenworth City until it was over.
Yeah.
Because it was just, we go everywhere, we do everything.
Yeah.
We've had it, and if it comes back around again, I'd rather be sick again with whatever the ramifications are than to hide in my house. That's not my thing. And did that have much of an economic impact, do you think? Do you think others were the same, and people like a little more leery to go out, even the citizens?
Well, we've taken a double hit here in Leavenworth, because, first there was the shutdown. That just devastated local businesses here. And I'd like to say again, I've said it before, but I'd just like to say again how appreciative I am of the people of Leavenworth for throwing their arms around our business and all the other businesses here in town, keeping us alive through that period. But not everyone's made it. But we were starting to get back on our feet. We were starting to recover, and then Governor Kelly renewed her mandatory mask ordinance, and we didn't pass it. We chose to opt out of it here in Leavenworth County, but then our city commission imposed a mask ordinance with a fine, a monetary fine, and it just crushed our business all over again. We lost 15% of our business the week the ordinance passed, and it hadn't come back yet. And a whole other round of restaurants and businesses closed because it's not that people were afraid to go out, it's that people didn't want to get hassled, and so folks stopped going out. And so that really high on the agenda is doing something to bring a little more of the people's voice and a little bit of more of the business owners' voices to the COVID restrictions that are being placed on our economy and placed on our people, so that obviously we've got to be safe, but the cure can kill the patient, I think, is what we discovered last year. We got to keep our country and our state and our city running while we're being safe.
Agree 100%. Now, I know you talked about last time about the high unemployment rates and so many jobs being left. Do you still have plans on the table to work with options that would help those of a lower economic standard raise their standard through employment?
Yep. So I'm 100% laser focused on getting my neighbors back into the economy in North Leavenworth. I mean, this coronavirus was hard on them, but they had tough lives before this all started. But I'm doing this in a stepped approach. Step one is we got to have jobs for them.
Yes.
If we want to have jobs for them, there's got to be money in the economy. And right now, we're stripping money out of the economy at 5 to 10% a year in these huge property tax valuation increases, and in our huge sales tax, our huge income tax. Once we've got that under control, then the jobs are going to be available. We got to get the folks into the economy, and get them into those jobs by helping them escape this trap of generational poverty that they're stuck in. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bigger nut to crack.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely the tougher of the two steps to really get Kansas back on its feet and back as an economic leader in the country. But I haven't forgotten, and I'm working on it every day.
Do you think that lifting the mask mandate in the city would have an impact, if that would bring more people back out into the businesses and the restaurants?
Yeah.
So therefore, there would be more jobs available?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And apparently a lot of people agree with me. There's this group, it's called We the People Leavenworth County. They are circulating petitions
Yeah.
here in Lansing and in Tonganoxie, where there are mask mandates, ordinances from the cities to repeal those ordinances. And I've been listening very closely because I'm obviously intensely interested in the work they're doing, and I'm supportive of it. And they're darn near to their goal of 695 signatures just in a month since the ordinance was passed here in Leavenworth. So obviously a lot of people agree with me that there's a way to be safe without being oppressive and without disincentivizing people leaving their house. I think the other piece of getting folks to work, and the other piece of lifting the chains of government dependency from folks is not digging the hole deeper. And there's every year the legislature gets hit with this demand for Medicaid expansion. Which is really Obamacare expansion. It's just putting able-bodied people on the Medicaid rolls and putting all the disabled and the elderly folks and the children behind them in line. So we've got to, while we're trying to remove the chains of government dependency and help people escape generational poverty, the last thing we need to do is put more chains on their back while we're doing it by giving people this impossible choice between Medicaid expansion and growing their lives. So that's kind of the other component.
Now, I'd like to get back to the Veterans Home.
Yeah,
Can you
please.
tell us a little bit more about that? Because I know we've talked before, and at Christmas, we had raised some money prior, and plus what we put into it and some other donations. And for Thanksgiving, we took $200-300 worth of groceries over to the Veterans Community Project over in Missouri.
Yeah.
And then for Christmas, when I got a hold of them, they asked if, they said that they had the people that were living in the tiny homes, which are now basically homed, they had sponsors to help all of them for Christmas. And then they asked if we could sponsor those that are still living on the streets that they work with.
Yeah.
And so, working as a volunteer in many organizations, you never know when someone says, "Can we help?" if they have $35, or if they have $500, or what they have. So we told them point blank, we've got at least $1,100 to work with.
Yeah.
And they sent us a list, and we filled pretty much everything on the list. We're starting with warm boots. We managed to get 15 pair. Was it 15 pair? 15 pair
Wow,
of.
that's awesome.
Because they said they had smaller sizes,
Yeah.
and they needed 10 through 13. So we managed to get of those, and they were all minus 20. You're rated for minus 20 degrees below. Keep your feet warm. I mean, if your feet aren't warm, the rest of you is never going to be comfortable. If your feet are warm, it doesn't matter if the rest of you is warm. You're still a pretty happy person.
Yeah.
And for the military, that's the first thing you learn. Keep your feet warm, keep your feet dry. And beyond that, you live.
Feet, hands, and head.
Yeah. And so, and then we got long johns and shirts and ski gloves, and we got a few hand warmers and things, but those aren't that useful. You need stuff that's going to keep you warm all the time and comfortable. And then plus we had fun stuff. We had decks of cards and dice and things they can put in their pocket to stay entertained and stay social, and all of that. And that was really great. But I know one thing that Senator Braun said when I was talking about that is, can you do it for Kansas instead? And I said, find me the place that does that. And he said, we're working on that.
Yeah.
So why don't we tell us more about this, and then tell us what the public can do, besides, calling their legislature, what can the public do to help you with this?
Yeah, well, first of all, on behalf of every veteran, I know you served yourself, thank you for what you do for our veterans. I mean,
we do what we need to do. You do the right thing, that's what we do.
No, I really appreciate it. and I know the veterans do too. You know, there's a similar facility down in Dodge City now.
Oh, okay, good.
The Soldiers Home, Kansas Soldiers Home there. But you know, we do not have a facility up here in this part of Kansas for you know, like assisted living, but also elder care and all those things for and kind of hospice care type facility up here in Northeast Kansas. So right now, if you're a veteran and you need to use those services, your family has to send you down to Dodge City, and that's a long darn way. Let me tell you, I made the drive before. That's a long darn way from Leavenworth. That veteran's not getting visited as much, not as close to their family, you know, in the later years of their life. And so, I have, from the time I decided to run, I started talking to people. Darn near every veteran I talked to that's in any way plugged in to the VFW here, the American Legion, was talking to me about that veterans home. And they're consistently lobbying down in Topeka to get that veterans home. And for years and years, what we were getting is, oh, I'm working on it. But honestly, the reason that we weren't getting it is because we kept sending a Democrat to Topeka, and it's the fact of the matter is Topeka is a Republican town, and you just you know, if you're a Democrat, you can't carry a bill. You can't, you know, if you sponsor a bill, it's not going to get to the floor. So we've got a Republican representative, and I have heard the people of Leavenworth loud and clear, and so I'm going to get this thing done. I'm going to bring it home. Honestly, for the folks at home, I'm going to do everything that I can to keep you informed along the process through my mailing list. If you haven't signed up for my mailing list, you can go to Pat Proctor for KS, the number 4KS.com, and there's a little button where you can sign up for it. But I'm going to keep the folks here in town informed about where we are in the process, and there's going to come a time when it's going to come up for a vote, and that's when I'm going to need everybody to make some phone calls and send some emails, and I'm going to help you do that through my mailing list so that we can bring this thing home for our veterans. And I can't, you know, I say it's a veterans home for Northeast Kansas. I can't say for sure that it's going to be in the city of Leavenworth, but I did a tour right before Christmas with the folks at the VA hospital here in Leavenworth, and we looked at, you know, probably 2 or 3 buildings that'd be perfect. You know, this is kind of tragic, but it kind of highlights the reason we need a veterans home here. The CLC there, the Living Center.
We're not a military.
It's the Living Center for kind of the Community Living Center on the hospital. All those patients and all those services are going to move to Topeka. Which is bad because we're not going to have the service here, but it's good because that building is going to be empty. And if we can get the legislation passed for this veterans home, I know a place where that would be perfect for it. So
And that also keeps the jobs that will be leaving when that leaves, brings them back to Leavenworth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know a lot of times one of the big things when you're military is keeping your spouse employed, because as a spouse you need to have some sort of continuity also yourself. And I say spouse because it's not always the husband that's military. A lot of times it's the wife, and they're bringing a husband along, and this keeps the jobs there.
And the other awesome thing about this veterans home is the legislation that I've sponsored taps into a federal program. So the Veterans Administration is going to pay 65% of this thing. We only have to come up with 35% of it. It's just we got to get the legislation passed and get the grant requested, and then come up with that 35%. So that's what I'm fighting to do right now.
Now, from working with VFWs in the past, I'm familiar with the Veterans Home, but I think a lot of people are probably thinking it's more along the lines of the Veterans Community Project across the river, and it's not. So why don't you explain what it is to Kansas?
So the Veterans Home, like I said, it's going to provide this kind of this elder care, assisted living, up to hospice care, right up here in Northeast Kansas. You know, so that folks don't have to send their loved ones all the way down to Dodge City and see them whenever they can make that drive. It's, you know, and it's also going to bring those jobs and all that. But I hope that it will also be a place where we can continue to serve those who serve us. Yet, those folks are going to be here in our community or close to our community, and I think it would be awesome if we could get schools or youth organizations to sponsor events to send kids out there to meet those veterans and hear their stories and learn the value of service to our nation, which I think we've discovered once again this week, is so important. And also the veteran service organizations and stuff, it gives them a way to continue to give back to those older veterans right here in our neck of the woods in Kansas.
So you're gonna make sure that the community has a chance to be impactful to the extent they
Right.
choose to also.
If there's one thing I know about Leavenworth, I'm not gonna have to do any work there at all. I mean, in Leavenworth, neighbors take care of neighbors. That's what I love about this place. You saw it, it was reaffirmed for me during the coronavirus shutdown when people were just digging deep to, not to just take care of themselves and their own family, but to take care of those folks that were out of work and those folks that were in need. And so I might take a little credit for it, but I'm not gonna have to do much work in order to inspire the people of this town to reach out to those that need their help.
We'll give you organizational credit.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I know about Leavenworth and Lansing to a great extent also, is I used to drive the Patriot Guard.
Yeah.
And we had a funeral and they actually buried the young man on the base.
Yeah.
So we came all the way through, and his family was from Ottawa,
Uh-huh.
not Ottawa, Olathe.
Uh-huh.
So we came up slowly with about 500-600 bikes.
That's awesome.
And so we came all the way slowly. We were going 20 miles an hour maximum, which if anybody rides, that's a killer for that long. And we got up here, and all along the way, the police were stopping traffic. And when we got to Lansing, there was no need of the police any longer, because once you hit Lansing, all the businesses were closed, the car dealerships were closed, the fast food restaurants were closed, because everybody came out to honor him. If anybody was in a car, they didn't have the opportunity for the police to stop you in the traffic.
Yeah.
Because the citizens had gotten out of their car, turned it off, and were standing there for his last ride.
Yeah.
When you got to Leavenworth, the streets were packed to honor him, and when you got on base, when you first go on base, all the children were right at the gate. And yeah, it's okay.
That's
we
cool.
all were too. That's what we
That's
wear
cool.
our t-shirts when we ride.
That's really awesome.
And that just shows the love of their country for this part of
Yeah.
Kansas.
Yeah. This, what caused us to stay here, we came in 2006 and we started the restaurant and we opened this one and then a bunch of others. But one of the many things that we loved about Leavenworth is not just the number of veterans that are here, but the folks that aren't veterans and how much they love our veterans and love our military, and how much respect they hold for veterans here in this town. So it's just one of the great things about Leavenworth and about this whole region of Kansas, and frankly about Kansas itself.
In general, yeah.
So I'm always just humbled and honored to be a small part of that legacy, but also that the people here in this state and in this community appreciate the sacrifices we made so much.
I agree. Now, we've covered a lot of ground. And is there anything else you want to go over? Anything else you want to add? Do we want to go to a national level, or we'll stick to the local level for now?
Well, I know you're probably itching to talk a little bit about the goings on of the last week, and I'd be happy to share my thoughts with you. So.
Sure. And one of the things we need to remember first off is that listen twice to the news, because I was at Topeka.
Yeah.
When Channel 4 and some others were talking about how we, what was the word they used? Stormed, yeah.
Override?
That we stormed the
Yeah.
State House in Topeka. In actuality, I didn't go in because I chose not to wear a mask and I had some editing to do. But they had a use permit and they had to all don masks and go through the metal detector for security, and every single person did. So whoever called and said we stormed Topeka, that's fine, but the mainstream media needs to check their stories before they post their stories, because if my job would have seen that, I could have been unemployed before I had a chance to get back
Yeah.
for something like that, because
Yeah.
I'm presuming that my supervisor knew where I was that day.
And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's kind of where I wanted to start.
Yeah.
I have been very, very shocked and concerned over the last week at this, just this explosion of the cancel culture. The number of folks on the left side of the political spectrum that are trying to exact political revenge against everybody who ever posted a post they didn't like on Facebook. We had several local business owners. I was not one of them, but we had several local business owners that went to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
to exercise their First Amendment right
Mhm.
to peaceably assemble and make their redresses known to the government that is their government, our
Yeah.
government, right? They, before they could even make it back, people were pointing them out, trying to publicly shame them, telling all kinds of horrific lies about them
Mhm.
on the internet, and organizing boycotts of their businesses. Now, let me tell you something. These are the people that knuckled down and fought through this coronavirus economic shutdown in order to keep our neighbors employed,
Yeah.
keep our neighbors in jobs. And now, because they're emboldened by the concession, the president's concession to exact political revenge, they're going to make the economic devastation that's already put our town at risk even worse by punitive boycotts. And I think that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, a Libertarian, and unaffiliated, you should be angry that people are being punished for exercising their First Amendment rights, and you should stand with those people. You should go to those businesses. You should reject those boycotts, because in America, we are allowed to disagree with one another peacefully
Mhm.
and without violence. We are allowed to redress our grievances with our government, and nobody should be punished for that,
Yeah.
including you with your boss.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that the company I work for, if they would have seen that we were storming the Capitol and no one was there, I mean, I'm not saying they would or wouldn't, worked for a good company,
Yeah.
but it's just the point,
Yeah.
that's an option they would have
Yeah.
had. Well, we're not
Yeah.
going, that makes us look bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they could have easily said that. A lot of companies could, that could have an impact on, I know I ran into a lot of people from churches there, that could have an impact on your standing in your church. If you walk in, well, you're a bad guy.
Yeah.
You went through and you're a violent
Yeah.
person, you did
Yeah.
this. And then all of a sudden, the same guy that's been guarding you at church and willing to put his life between you and any gunman that might come in and to protect you and your
Yeah.
children, all of a sudden people are saying this about them. And I'm saying that because I ran into a lot of church people that were in those positions that were, sheepdogs at their church and that were leaders in their church. And you're saying they did some bad things, the same as a lot of times, regardless of which side you're on,
Yeah.
the media will frequently jump at the first sensationalism
Yeah.
instead of having a reason. So whenever someone's ever,
Yeah.
because of my position here, I get, and with the party, I get a lot of phone calls and texts and messages at all hours of the day and night. And the thing I've said all along, and I think it's probably
Yeah.
not the same thing with you, is stop, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
remain calm, and watch, because it's not always what initially
Yeah.
appears. It may be
Yeah.
exactly, but it
Yeah.
seldom is. It may be better, it may be worse, but you need to give a chance for everything to come out before.
Yeah, and
You get too
I
excited
know
one way or
you,
another.
I know you agree with me, because we've talked
Oh, yeah.
throughout this week. You agree with me, there's no place for violence in American politics.
Yeah.
Nobody's condoning the actions of thugs, in DC or anywhere else.
No.
I spent 25 years in the Army, defending supporting and defending
Yes.
our Constitution in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And in those places, I saw what it looks like when political disputes are settled through violence. it turns your country into Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm not telling you anything that
No,
you don't
no,
know, but I
everybody
want
doesn't
I want to
understand
make
that,
sure
yeah.
everybody understands that. And I know that there's a lot of people whose passions are up right now, and they're angry and they're upset, and they're saying things because they're angry and they're upset. But I'm going to tell you, I've seen what it looks like when we try to solve our disputes through violence, and I will not let that happen in our country. As long as I have the means to resist, up to my death, I will resist us resorting to violence, while there's still plenty of legal means for us to exercise our rights and protect our rights. But beyond that, it is really terrifying, to get to what you started that discussion with. It is really terrifying to watch how cancel culture is stifling free thought and free speech, because people are afraid. If I repost that thing asking legitimate questions about what went on in DC, or that thing asking legitimate questions about why the Pennsylvania Supreme Court or Secretary of State or whoever can change laws that are made by the legislature, when they're the only ones with the right to set election laws for the presidential election according to the U.S. Constitution, I might be canceled. I might be ostracized. I might be fired. People may boycott my business. That's not America. That is, we used to sit in school and read about McCarthyism and wag our fingers and shake our heads at how horrible it is that they were blacklisting people because there was a hint that they might have had some political view that was outside of the mainstream. Well, now the communists are ascendant in our country, and they're doing the same darn thing that they put all over our school books for us to learn in school. So I would say that be firm, stand tall, and stand for what you believe in, and speak your mind, is your right in a republic, but do it peacefully.
I agree 100%. There's so many things that we can still continue to do, and still continue to have dialogue with one another. If you're frustrated and you need to vent, we've all got friends we can vent to. Let's keep it there.
Yeah, and the people that
vent and have your day, and
exactly.
then take a deep breath and just keep going. Keep on your day-to-day activities. Keep doing what you need to do, and we're going to get through this because we are still the greatest country in the world.
Yeah. And I am getting a lot of people that are asking that question. Okay, so what do we do, right? What are those legal means?
So what do we do, Pat?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tracy. I'd like to talk about for just a second. So I think that at the root of a lot of this angst and concern about our voting system is the fact that election day has turned into election month, and you don't actually have to go any place physical and vote. You can just sit at your kitchen table and you can fill out a ballot and send it in, and it's not going to get counted till after all the people who voted on election day did. So people sit at home and they watch the election day results and they're like, oh, my side won. And then all these votes from early voting, for the previous weeks or months, and all these votes that got mailed in because there's no excuse mail-in voting, reverse the result, and it does look kinky to people because they went to sleep on election night thinking their side had won. We saw it again here in Georgia, up to 92% of the vote in. The two Republican senators were winning, and then after midnight, as the mail-in and the early votes started to come in those big cities, they ended up losing. And so election day is one of those secular sacred days, if that makes sense. Like the 4th of July or President's Day or Thanksgiving. It's one of those days that we all celebrate being American, and we all go to the polls and we exercise our responsibility and our right to make our voice heard at the ballot box. And I think the fact that we've gotten away from that, and we've eroded that so much, is a danger. It's a danger to the Republic. We're watching the dangers play out in real time on our TVs this last week and in the weeks before. And so there is a lot we can do because election law is controlled, according to the U.S. Constitution, by the state legislatures. And the state legislatures in each of these states, whether they're battlegrounds or not battlegrounds, are going to be taking a look at the election laws. You know, I saw in the Sunflower State Journal today that our own Secretary of State is having extreme difficulty implementing this vote anywhere law, right? Somebody thought it was a good idea that you didn't have to go to your polling place to vote. You could go to any polling place and they had to have a ballot ready for you for your precinct and your district, right? And so, not surprisingly, the Secretary of States have, and all the counties, because the county clerks are the ones that actually administer the election, can't figure out how to do that, because how am I going to know who walks in the front door? And am I going to have like one of every ballot in the state ready, or every ballot in the county ready for when somebody walks in the door in case they go to the wrong polling place? So that's, you know, I sit on the elections committee this year, which I was as surprised as anybody to find out. But I went and I talked to the Secretary of State's office last week, and had a great discussion with the folks that work on elections there about how, you know, some things we can do to clean up our election laws, but also to get back to that core idea of an election day where we all exercise our right and our responsibility to vote. And so I definitely want to take a look at that.
Now, you talked about Election Day being a secular holiday, basically. That usually means there's some sort of a pomp and circumstance, even if it's just personal. Do you and your family, do you have pomp and circumstance or something special you do on Election Day together, or what do you guys do? You know what?
I am as guilty of this as the rest of the country. I walked in and I voted early because I knew that on Election Day I was going to be pretty darn busy because I was on the ballot, but also because I'm the chair of the county Republican, or the vice chair of the county Republican Party here. I was helping a lot of great volunteers do all the poll watching and Election Day results tabulation on that evening. And so I am as guilty of this as anybody. But I remember before early voting and mail-in voting became so prevalent, when everybody made 7 in the morning to 7 at night. People found a time during their day, or they went during their lunch hour, or they did whatever they had to do to go exercise their responsibility. And that day, everybody's walking around with their I voted sticker or their I voted pin, and just as proud as they could be. And I talked about Iraq and Afghanistan a minute ago. I was in Iraq for the last elections that happened while the Americans were there the first time, before we had to go back for ISIS. And the Sunnis in the area where I was had sat out the previous election as a boycott, and the Shia swept the legislature, and they realized their mistake, and so they all came out and voted that next time. And I get a little bit choked up just thinking about the looks on all those folks' faces when they came out of the polling place, and they all got the ink on their finger, and they're proud to show it. Because they're they're exercising their political power in what they hoped might someday be a democracy, and they're still on their way, but they're getting there. And when I saw that, I just thought about how much we take for granted what those people, a lot of them, risked their lives to do. And it all came flooding back to me. Flooding back to me this week when I was watching those millions of people who were peacefully protesting out on the National Mall, making their voices heard. They were so energized and so adamant about making sure that their vote counted, and that their vote wasn't diluted by votes by people who weren't eligible to vote. That they stood out there in the cold. You know, many of them flew or drove hours and hours and hours, including folks from our town,
Yeah.
to get to that spot in that moment in time. And it's also why it broke my heart that, you know, a few, you know,
Yeah.
crazies ruined it all by exercising violence and engaging in violence with our incredible law enforcement officers. You know, that's kind of heartbreaking, but it doesn't take away from the fact that those three, you know, three, I've heard different numbers of millions of people, you know, stood out there on the National Mall and made their voices heard. And so there's hope. There must be hope, or those people wouldn't have went out there and made their voices heard.
Yep, and I know we had a couple of occasional Watch Kansas contributors that were out there, and there was just too much going on to get video and such. And one of them took two of her kids, their older kids with, they didn't take the smallest one because there was too much going on. And of the two older kids, because there was so much going on, they tied themselves belt loop to the children. That way, and the kids were like, yes, please, because we don't want to get lost in this. So they each took a kid and tied them belt loop to belt loop. That way, everybody could move around a little bit. They couldn't get lost without a lot, because belt loops are pretty, jeans are pretty durable. And so people were, and they weren't the only kids out there. People were taking their families out to show what's important. I know growing up, it would have been much easier for my parents, who got off at different times, for my dad to leave us with my grandmother and go vote, and then bring us home and mom go vote. But they never ever did. My dad picked us up from my grandparents because he got off early, and we met mom, and we all went and voted. And back in the day, when you literally pulled the lever, and young people won't understand this reference, but you went in and you actually pulled a lever down for everything, and it put a little hole in a punch card. And once again, young people won't understand this, but that's where the reference hanging Chad came into. Those little holes, those little things that got punched out were Chads. And then they had a kids voting machine with fun questions that you could practice, and they made it important. My parents always made it. One of your kids bigger now, but our kids when we were little, and then as an adult, when I was in the same voting district as my parents, I would throw complete fits. 20-year-olds, 21, 22-year-olds don't normally want to do much with the parents, but if they went and voted without me, I threw fits because I expected them to wait for me to get off work too, so we could all go vote together, because that's how I was raised. It was, like you said, it was a celebration of our freedoms and what we could do.
Yeah, and it's, I won't say it's one of my regrets, because I don't regret having served, but it's definitely one of the sacrifices of my service that a lot of times I was not in the state where I was registered to vote, because I was serving someplace else. And so, I was voting the military absentee ballot, or in November 2012, I was in Afghanistan, and so I obviously couldn't share that day with my family that was back here in Kansas while I was serving. But I missed the opportunity to do that direct. But I think that it's so awesome that you had that experience, and I think it's so awesome that so many people took it that seriously as we were growing up, and I feel like that's missing now. That's missing when we have an election month, and you just fill out a piece of paper and a ballot shows up in your mail, for any reason. I got one more story to tell you. I'm gonna try to get through it without breaking down, but. A friend of mine that I met here in Leavenworth when I was knocking on doors, named Gail Schoen, and a couple weeks before the election, he called me because he was very concerned. He was in the hospital with very serious illness, and he was just very concerned that he could get his absentee ballot in time to vote. And he needed help making sure that they got the request and the ballot was on its way out. And so the Secretary of State's office has built some great tools like voter view and stuff to help. So I was able to help him navigate that and find out exactly where his ballot was, and make hey, it's coming, and then he called me back when he got it, and he was like so proud that he got to vote because it was so important to vote. And Gail passed the day after the election. And so the last election that he ever got to participate in, it just so powerful, and so, when I think about that sanctity of the vote, that sanctity of that day, and how important it is, that's another one of those things that flooded back to me last week. Is that guy, it was the most important thing in the world to him when he's laying on his deathbed, was that he got to vote in the presidential election and in the vote in the local and the state elections before he passed. So
So you got to help him fulfill his last
yeah,
wish.
it's pretty awesome.
That's
I'm gonna
a
hold
major-
that with me my whole life.
That's a
Yeah.
major honor. Well, Pat, is there anything else you'd like to, before we wrap this up? I think
Yeah.
we've probably taken up enough of your
Yeah.
time today. We really appreciate it.
No, I really do appreciate it, and I hope that we can do this again
Always.
multiple times throughout the session. But I think what I would wrap up by saying is that I'm just so honored to have the opportunity to continue to serve the people of Leavenworth, and I'm humbled and honored that you selected me to be your representative. I feel all of the weight of that responsibility that you put on my shoulders, and I'm gonna work hard every day, every night, many times to fulfill that expectation and the hopes that folks have placed on me.
Yeah, I know Pat sometimes burns midnight oil because there are frequent occasions that I will send him messages when I'm doing the same to try to get something done for Watch Kansas. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'll send him a message and I'm not expecting a reply back till the next day. And a few minutes later, a reply pops up. So I know how hardworking he is.
Yeah, that's one of the occupational hazards of being a restaurant owner is the workday's 24 hours long. So I'm up anyways. I might as well be working for the people I'm working.
And I was figuring you was gonna say that's one of the occupational hazards of military officer, because you had to be available not only to your country 24/7, but frequently to the people who worked under you in case of emergency.
It's kind of like they were training me for this moment in my life, huh?
Bingo. Now, contact information. Can you let Kansas know
Yeah.
the best way to get a hold of you
Okay.
if they have concerns that they need to address to your office, or if they just want to make sure they send a little message to you on occasion to
Yeah.
say thank you and keep at it, we're behind you. Where can Kansas get a hold of you?
That's a great question. I really do appreciate all the encouragement that I get. That little note that takes you 30 seconds or 15 seconds to bang out means the world to me, especially when the slings and arrows that come with public service are coming. So I try to stay very active on Facebook, and that's me. There ain't a campaign team that's engineering my message behind the scenes. There's Pat Proctor with his phone downstairs in the kitchen usually, or in my living room, or on the road someplace between events, not driving. And so the best way to get a hold of me is on my Facebook page, Pat Proctor for Kansas Representative. You can message me from there. You can also find me, I'm just Pat Proctor, and you'll see me posted in there. You can also contact me through Messenger there. My email address is pat@patproctor, the number 4ks.com. And then that's also my website, patproctorforkansas.com. That email address also goes to me. There ain't no office full of paid consultants, because I'm on a shoestring here, and I answer every email that I get, especially from constituents. But I answer every email I get. I obviously will have a house email address, pat.proctor@house.ks.gov. But you know what? If you want to get a hold of me, just send an email to that campaign email, because that's where all the lobbyists pester you for to vote their way on arcane legislation that makes somebody money. So if you want to get to me, that probably the best way is either on Facebook or at that email address. And I'm also going to give you my phone number. It goes to my house, but it forwards to my phone, my cell phone, wherever I am. You can call me anytime, because I want to hear from you. I want to hear what's important to you. Don't be afraid to call. The number's 913-250-5553. I am dedicated to being accessible to the people of Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth, whether you agree with me or you don't agree with me, or you want to change my mind, or you just want to say attaboy. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you want to say attaboy. And then the final thing that I would say is that I'm going to try to do a town hall at least once a month
Great.
while I'm here. All the invite stuff will go out on my mailing list, which you can get on, which I talked about earlier, but it'll also go on Facebook. I'm going to try to move it around in time and in day of the week, so that folks that can't be at a certain time, they get an opportunity to hear from me or talk to me and let me know what they think about stuff at a time that works for them. I'm going to do them at different locations. There'll be some at the restaurant. There'll be some, at public places if public places ever open again. And so I am determined to be as accessible as I possibly can, so that I know what you're thinking about the issues that you're asking me to represent you on up in Topeka.
Perfect, and I can attest, he does get back with you. He is easy, both between when he was running for office and now that he's part of the legislature. Every time I've tried to get a hold of him, he may be busy for a bit, and he'll get back with you when he can, and I can personally attest to this. So this is Tracy with Watch Kansas, and I want to thank Pat Proctor for joining us once again. Thank you.